Hello and welcome to Silverstone, where only 4 weeks ago the British Grand Prix was taking place. However, this weekend it's the turn of the GT Cup Championship. Huge grid for you. We've got about 58 cars, including a car racing in the GTA for the first time this season as well. Now, of course, there have already been 2 races this weekend. They happened yesterday. Here's a reminder of what happened with Mark Werrell.
Well, for the 16th round of the GT Cup Championship, it would be Hugo Cook and Simon Orange that would start in their Mercedes and the McLaren, respectively, on the front row of the grid. And as this 35-car field charged its way through Copse Corner for the first time, Roy Millington had to run a little bit wide at the wheel of the Ferrari, as did Adrian Watt at the wheel of the Porsche. But it would be Steve Burgess in the Radical from the second row of the grid that would pick up the lead of the race. However, Hugo Cook was putting under pressure as they went through Village and up towards the loop. The extra power of the Group GTO Radical should tell, though, because in a straight line it is quicker. However, it doesn't quite have the same aero effect as the Mercedes. So Steve Burgess would hang on to the lead of the race, and Hugo Cook, making his debut in the series, would be there in second place. For Group GTC, there was a fantastic fight going on for the lead. Lucky Kira squabbling away with James Webb, and Charlotte Birch having a great run at the wheel of the Soul. There was a spin for Andre Borodin at the wheel of his Greystone GT McLaren, but the lead squabble in Group GTC was just getting better and better and better. The 3 Lamborghinis were getting caught by the Ferrari in the background of Roy Millington, whilst Andre Borodin started to make progress again, having recovered from his spin. Hugo Cook had another nibble for the lead of the race in exactly the same place as he had earlier on, the run in towards Village, but this time through, the Mercedes cleared the Group GTO Radical, and it will put Hugo Cook at the wheel of his Enduro-supported Mercedes that he's sharing with Marcus Clutton in the pit stop race into the lead of the race. He would still, though, try and defend to make sure he kept that Radical behind on the run down the Wellington Straight and in towards Brooklands. Back to the lead battle in Group GTC, Charlotte Birch having her best run of the season, but she was still under pressure from the light blue Mercedes of James Webb all of the time, whilst the red Ferrari of Roy Millington was beginning to close in. However, for Lucky Kira, there was a wing failure on the number 247 Group GTC leading Lamborghini. You would like to think around Silverstone that would cause him problems. He had lost a couple of places, but he was about to pick them back up again, just as the pit window opened. During that pit window, David McDonald took over the Lamborghini. They removed the rear wing on it, which meant that the thing was a rocket ship in a straight line. Did make it rather difficult round through the tricky corners, in particular the very fast section at Abbey, and of course through the Maggotts and Beckett's complex. That was not going to be a nice Lamborghini to drive for the rest of the race. In Group GTH, Will Dendy was leading the way, whilst there were some great fights going on between the 2 Formula Woman cars, the number 64 car and the number 65 car respectively. Steph Saw eventually managing to sneak her way through and ahead of Jodie Sloss and go through and past her teammate. Michael O'Brien had now taken over the number 67 McLaren and had managed to get himself through and ahead of the number 16 Mercedes of Ian Logie, whilst on circuit Steve Burgess was encountering fuel issues at the wheel of what had been the overall race-leading Radical. It started to grind to a halt coming out of Luffield. He would reset everything, fire the engine back up and would get going again, but the car that had been leading was no longer even in the podium slots. It had now dropped itself down to the bottom of the top 6, so it wasn't going to be a double win for the man from Nottingham who had won the sprint race earlier on in the day. Marcus Clutton, having taken over the number 66 Mercedes from Hugo Cook, was now coming under pressure for the overall race lead from the charging Michael O'Brien. Now, the Mercedes that was leading was not eligible for championship points, so maybe that was within the thought process of Michael O'Brien. He would want the overall win for himself and Simon Orange, but equally as much would know, even if he overtook the Mercedes, he was not going to gain any more championship points. Sitting in second would give them enough points to claim the win in the group with the non-championship car ahead of them. So as they worked their way through Woodcote Corner and up towards the checkered flag, it was going to be a win for Hugo Cook and Marcus Clutton. in their first weekend of racing together in the GT Cup Championship. For Simon Orange and Michael O'Brien, it was second on the road, but it would beat the points for the win.
In yesterday's pit stop race, there were some fantastic battles going on amongst the Lamborghinis, one of which is behind me here, 247, the one of Lucky Kira. Now, hang on a minute, you don't normally race in a Lamborghini.
No, I don't. We're having consistent brake issues, which we've tackled all year, really, and yesterday gave it up because it weren't rectifying and jumped in the Lamborghini and, trying to get to grips with it.
Yeah. So how are you finding it, first of all?
It's a completely different driving style and car, really, but, I'm getting my head around it, and each time I go out, I'm getting a bit quicker.
Yeah. Well, listen, we've got to talk about the race yesterday, the pit stop, because it was fantastic, but you also had this whole issue with the rear wing coming off. So tell us what happened.
Yeah, so, the team were good. They radioed in, says, look, your rear wing's a bit to the left, and then I had a moment coming into Brooklands, and I was on the grass, a bit through the gravel, lost my spaces, and then I thought, screw the rear wing, let's go. And I'd lost the places, I wanted them back.
Yeah. And you got them back. I mean, you were overtaking.
I was, yeah. I was on a mission.
Yeah.
I was on a mission.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It really was. And of course, once then during the pit stop, you had the rear wing sort of taken off. It didn't seem to sort of have quite such a good effect, I don't think. You should have just left it as it was.
Well, it was David that jumped in the car when the wing wasn't there.
Yeah.
So you'd have to speak to him on that one.
Well, listen, how are you feeling ahead of today's race?
Like I say, just getting to grips with the car. Keep it safe, keep it on the track, hopefully.
Yeah, because it's a bit of a weird one with the weather, isn't it? They keep saying it's going to be wet, but we're not sure.
Yeah, well, my granddad told me something funny about the weather, and I won't say it on camera, but
Tell me off, Mike.
PWs, don't trust them.
Oh, okay. I'll leave you guessing as to what that one is. And I have to just say, was it last weekend you were racing at Spa?
I was, yeah. Last minute call, jumped out, new track-ish and new car, but
amazing.
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah. What a great experience. Well, listen, it's lovely having a chat with you because we don't always get to have a long chat. Normally it's in Parc Fermé or something, but listen, good luck with it. Have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, this weekend sees us head to the home of the British Grand Prix, Silverstone on the Northamptonshire and Buckinghamshire border. It's a world-renowned circuit. It is one that the drivers absolutely love to come and race around. And in its current configuration, there are plenty of challenges out there for them as well. First opened in 1948. It was the first of the circuits to host a World Championship Grand Prix. And in its current configuration, it's just over 3.5 miles long, split into 3 sectors. And with all of the work that was done a few years ago, there are now 18 corners on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. We start from the heritage pits here, which means that the first corner is Cox, and from there it brings you up to the end of Sector 1 at the end of the Hanger Straight just before Stowe. From there, Sector 2 brings us up towards Brooklands, and it's a short final sector through Brooklands, through Luffield, and then flat out over the start-finish line through Woodcut Corner. That is a lap of the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit.
Our final pit stop race of the weekend is looming, but someone who had an amazing pit stop race yesterday and who is new to GT Cup is Hugo Cook. Hi, Hugo.
Hi, how are you?
Well, I'm good. Welcome to GT Cup.
Thank you, it's good to be here.
Yeah, I bet it is after yesterday. So first of all, before we just reflect on the race, tell us a little bit about your journey here, because this is your first time racing in GT Cup Championship.
Well, last year, and I was meant to this year, I was doing a bit of TCR UK, but we had a bit of bad luck, so there was no point carrying on with that. And then we've been testing this a bit. We did a test in Barcelona, then we did a Brit car race about a month ago, and then came here really. But we've had a few issues, but it was all right yesterday.
Yeah, well, it certainly was. You did really well yesterday. Now, normally you're racing with Marcus Clutton, but he normally is here, obviously, with Morgan Tilbrook, who's not. So just tell us about how that's all come about.
Well, we knew that I think they'd pulled out of I don't think they did the last race, and we just wanted to, for me to run with a quicker driver and just bring me on a bit. So we rang Marcus, and it was very last minute, to be honest. The phone call was only about 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And he'd been in Spa last weekend, so he's done a mega job to get everybody here. And yeah, it's mega working with him, to be honest.
Yeah, I bet. And let's talk about the car a bit. It's Mercedes, you're in the GT3 group.
Yeah.
How are you finding the car?
It's a big step, but you know, we haven't really got the setup right yet. I think there's a lot more in the car, but yesterday we found some sort of a compromise, and it was enough.
Yeah.
But 100%, there's so much more in the car. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, and you're racing with Enduro Motorsport, of course, so you've got a great team behind you. How are you feeling ahead of today's pit stop?
Good. I think yesterday we obviously we have a 20-second penalty from yesterday's race, but we won with a 20-second penalty yesterday, so I've just got to try and get into the lead and head down and do the best I can.
Yeah, listen, I'm sure you will, and it's fantastic having you here at the GT Cup Championship. Good luck.
Cheers, thank you.
So there you go, a few little chats that we had earlier on. I'm wearing sunglasses. I'm not really sure why, because I'm seeing an awful lot of black cloud over there. We're having really mixed weather conditions here at Silverstone today. Supposedly it was only going to be wet this morning and then drying up, but we've had a massive shower in the Radical race, in fact, that's still out there at the moment. But then the tarmac has dried out again because there's quite a breeze, but then there's a lot of black cloud around, so we could get a downpour at any moment. And in fact, they have issued a wet weather warning, so the drivers are kind of preparing for that. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, we're coming up with the sprint, so it's the shorter of the races at 25 minutes. So hopefully it will remain a dry one for our drivers. Fingers crossed. Because the last race there was a safety car, so it's taken a little bit longer, so we're slightly behind schedule, but not too much. But I thought we'll just have a little bit of a walk down the pit lane. Hopefully I'll be able to have a chat with Mark in a minute as well about the lineup. But because it's a massive race weekend and we've got the GP 3 and 4 races, the garages right up there are all of those cars, but our GT Cup cars are all in the sort of second section, if you like, of the pits and the garages. So they're all down here, literally the entire length that you can see from the gantry onwards. Some usual suspects, but also some brand new drivers. You heard from Hugo Cook, the young man that I was speaking to earlier, which was great. I'll see if I can find anyone to have a chat to, actually, while we're here. See if I can recognise any faces. We get in the car. Oh, we've got a car coming out here already. Here we go. Might have to get out of the way in a minute. There's the number 80 of Ron Trenker, Raystone GT, and also John Lancaster being pulled out of the garage into position. So now our drivers are going to be starting to get ready to head out once we clear this particular one. I'm going to see if I can have a little... who's this man? Let's hang on. I'm going to chase this gentleman here. Ooh, excuse me. Hello. Sorry, I'm just chasing you. We're live on at the moment, so I thought I'd have a quick chat. If we can come out because it's a little bit dark in here. That's what happens when you get rubbish weather. So how are you feeling about today and today's race?
Well, it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it. A bit nervous, obviously, with the rain. Not quite sure what it's going to do.
Yeah.
Not quite sure what we're going to set up on tyre-wise yet.
That's what I was going to ask, actually, because I was literally just talking about that. What do you do? Because this is obviously the 25-minute one.
Uh-huh.
How do you play that? What's the team doing?
Well, I'll let the team make those decisions. I'll just get in and drive. Then, if anything goes wrong, it's not my fault.
That's one thing. Right, I'll let you get out of the way. Sorry, brilliant. Here we go. We've got a car coming out. So this is the difficulty that we've got, you see, because of these weather conditions. It's really difficult to know what tyres to actually put on the cars in the first place. The drivers don't really want to get involved with that, which is fair enough, because you want your team, which is why you've got the teams really in position to help with that. So more cars coming out of the garages now as well. In fact, that's something I'll probably ask Mark when he's available, which hopefully will be soon. I'll have a chat with him about that, because he does a lot of instructing and driving himself, so he'll have a little bit of an insight into the sort of tyre situation, which is good. What I will do, actually, is I've got the grid run down here, so I know we're not officially out on the grid yet, but I can let you know that we have Steve Burgess on pole position, and he's driving the Radical, and we actually had a Radical race going out earlier. So we'll be seeing Steve starting on pole position, and he had a great couple of races yesterday, both the sprint and the pit stop went really, really, really well for Steve. Next to him is going to be Ian Loggy. So interestingly, we've got two solo drivers at the front of the grid, which is really interesting, and also it's hard work for them. It's just started to rain. It's hard work for them because, of course, when it comes to the pit stop a bit later on, they're on their own. They're doing that 50 minutes of racing entirely by themselves. They don't get a chance to sort of, you know, do 20 minutes or 25 minutes and then get out and have a breather. It's all on them. So it's quite heavy going. So we've got both of those. And then we have our current championship leader, Simon Orange, in third position on the grid. Now, I think, is that right, Mark? You're with us now.
Yes, I am, Michelle.
Hello, it's just started raining, and I literally was going to ask you about what the tyre situation. I'm going to say that you're going to need your wets.
Well, we've just seen, you won't have seen it, but we've just had a brilliant race from the Radical Championship, and it started dry for them. Some of them are on slicks, some of them are on wets, and it then absolutely bucketed down. We get to the end of their 45-minute race, and all of a sudden it's dry again. So it's a real decision, isn't it?
It's really hard, and we literally just spoke to and he was like, I have no idea. I don't know what the team are going to decide because you just don't know. And of course, it's just started to rain now. And I've left my rain mac, of course, in the media centre. You can bring it for me, could you, Mark?
I'd love to. To be honest, it's that warm in here at the moment. I'd be quite happy to cool off.
Yeah, it is. It's really muggy. That's the other weird thing. The Radicals are all just coming in from the last race, and we're going to get the cars out hopefully soon. So one thing I wanted to ask you, and we were chatting about this, and I don't know if you've got any more information on it, but the Price McLeod car, the number 11 that's starting right at the back. Did we find out any more information about that? Because they were doing really well, weren't they? They
were doing really, really well. They've won races overall so far this year, but the car had a problem in practice session this morning, which meant that it sort of slowed down out on circuit and had some sort of problem. As to exactly what the problem was for it, I'm not entirely sure that we got to the bottom of it. But a man beside me, I don't want to put him totally on the spot, but Mo Ritson might have heard a little whisper from the paddock area. Thanks for joining me in commentary, Mo. Can you shed any light on it? It's a mystery to you as well.
Equally a mystery to me, as is the tyre situation as well. I think everyone's going to be scratching their heads.
That was the next question I was going to ask you. It's such a difficult thing, you know. I remember many years ago when I used to race very poorly, that decision to try and you look at the weather, you sat there in the assembly area in the case of these cars in the pit lane, you've got the wheels off the car because of course that gives you the best opportunity to make the decision one way or the other. You're looking at the clouds, you're trying to second guess what everybody else does. It's so difficult, isn't it?
It's so difficult. Nobody can ever get the right decision, you know, before the race has even started. I think everyone's going to be taking a gamble on which way to go. Personally, I would say slicks because the track's going to dry up. But yeah, we'll find out soon enough.
We will find out soon enough, and somebody that might be able to shed some light on it is Michelle, who's down there in the pit lane. Any idea what they're bolting onto the cars yet, Michelle?
I was about to ask because I can see some wheels are about to go on, so I was going to ask somebody what they've decided to do. Oh, but I've got cars coming out of me left, right and centre. Here we go, hang on.
Well, the Mike Price Callum McLeod car is the green Mercedes that was just coming out of the garage. That you might be able to find first hand.
Do you know what? I'm going to go back. Everything's going on here and see if I can have a quick chat with someone now and see what they're doing. In fact, can I just ask you, tyre-wise, what are you going to go with?
Not sure.
They still don't know. It's down to the last minute thing. It's like down to the wire of what's happening here, which is really interesting. Can I ask you any intel on what you're going to go for with the tyres?
I'll probably put a coat on.
He told me to put a coat on and not my sunglasses, which I'm holding, of course, which was really helpful. So we're not getting a lot of information. They seem to be keeping quite stum. Watch your back. We've got cars coming out of the garage. Yeah, people are not wanting to say too much about the tyres, Mark.
No, it's not surprising because they won't want to give anything away, Mo, but equally as much they might not have made the decision yet. The tyres are sitting in ovens out the back for the slicks, Mo, so it's a last minute decision, isn't it?
It's very last minute.
Literally last minute.
Those tyres will go on the car the second the car is about to go out. You know, when pit lane opens, the tyres will be on. They'll be going down pit lane straight away to keep as much heat as they can. And especially in these, the temperatures and the conditions, you don't want those tyres sitting on the car for longer than they need to be because the cold air is just going to cool those tyres down. And the more heat in the tyres, the better, really, especially when the track's slightly damp.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the tyres will be going on, like you said, soon, and I can see some are coming out. If you have a look now, here come all the tyres out of the garages. So last minute decision being made. And then once that's done, I'm assuming we can start heading out onto the track. So can we talk through the grid a little bit, Mark?
Yeah, we can do.
Because I was already mentioning that up on pole position, in fact on the front row, we've got two of our solo drivers. We've got Steve Burgess and Ian Loggy up front.
Yeah, well, Steve Burgess driving solo this weekend. He's been sharing all season with Ben Dimmock. Ben is here this weekend, but has opted not to drive. And this circuit really suits the Group GTO cars. We've seen them go well here in the past. We saw Paul Bailey and the Brabham take a win here last year in Group GTO. Because of the length of the circuit and the big long straights, Michelle, the more powerful cars can overcome the lack of aero in reality. And Ian Loggy back in the championship. He missed the previous round at Alton Park because he was racing in Portugal, where he took a win in a 24-hour race in Portugal in a GT4 Mercedes, but nice to see him back. So yeah, we'll wait and see. The problem for Steve Burgess is, I gather, the fuel issue that caused him problems yesterday in the race while he was leading, that fuel issue is still there today, fuel pump related, so he might have to coast into some of the corners he's suggesting. So I'm not sure how the Radical's going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ian Loggy, he had a good run when we were out last time, didn't he? In Alton Park, I seem to remember. Ian had a pretty good run then.
No, he wasn't at Alton. He missed Alton because he was racing in Portugal, but he had a good run at Snetterton.
That's right. It was Snetterton. I'm getting it all muddled up. Oh, honestly, my brain. I would blame the weather. It's the weather. The weather. My brain's got damp. That's what the problem is. We've got Simon Orange in number 3. He's currently leading the championship still, right, on points?
In terms of points, it's James Wallace and Sam Mayer-Loughlin that are leading the championship overall, coming into this weekend. Yeah. Simon Orange and Michael O'Brien are leading Group GT3 in terms of the championship, but coming into this weekend was second overall. I haven't done the math as yet as to where they are after yesterday's races, because it's been a busy old weekend, really.
I know, it's been really busy. And then the lad that I spoke to, Hugo Cook, he's sitting in position number 4 on the grid. A nice young lad that we're speaking to, who's racing with Marcus Clutton. And this is his first time out in GT Cup, as we were talking about. Yeah.
I mean, we've seen him racing the GT3 Mercedes in the past. Not huge amounts of racing in it, but to come into what is a very competitive championship, as you well know, Mo Ritson, who joins me in the commentary, and to go as well as Hugo Cook has done this weekend. Impressive stuff from the man who only turned 18 a couple of days ago.
It's very impressive, especially when he's only just got his driving licence, I'm sure, as well. It's to step in a championship like this, it's competitive. There's extremely experienced drivers and fast cars, so there's a lot to take in, a lot to take on. You know, when you've got these cars around you as well, I'm sure there's a lot going through his head, but he's doing really well and thriving through it all.
What tyres are they bolting on, Michelle? We've seen the tyres being bolted on.
Yeah, the cars, I don't know what we've gone for actually. Shall I see? Should we have a word?
They're wet by the look of
this. What tyre did you go for? Did you go for the wets?
Sorry?
Did you go for the wet tyres?
Can't tell you that.
He's not telling me! Top seat, he's not telling me.
You can see it's got a tread pattern. It's wet. It's wet. It's a wet tyre.
Isn't it? It's like, I can't tell you. Honestly, what they like. But yes, it has got a tread pattern on it. So they've gone for the wets for this 25-minute race. They're all starting to head out now, which means we can get out onto the grid and get this first sprint race started, which would be great. And we've got a huge grid this weekend. That's the other thing, Mark. Was it something like 58 cars?
58 cars in one of the support races that we'd got for the GT Cup Championship. I think we started the weekend with 33. We've sadly lost Richard Chamberlain's Porsche overnight, because he didn't even race yesterday, sadly, poor old Richard, with the orange Porsche, which we all love, and there's plenty of people watching that love that car. Fuel pump issues. Fuel pump. Alternator issues it was for Richard Chamberlain. So yeah, he's packed it and gone home, I'm afraid. So such a shame. I'll let you head out to the grid. Mo and I'll have a chat.
All right, well, listen, they're all now heading out. I think the garages are pretty much clear. So I'm going to hand over to you, Mark, to give us the full rundown of the grid ahead of this sprint race.
And by the look of things, as we look at the long-range camera shot, it's not raining our side of the circuit. It's fair to say that conditions are varying from one side of the circuit to the other, Mo. No decision about what tyres to use. It's absolutely bucketing it down at Club Corner.
I retract my statement on slicks now after seeing that. It'd be great for half a lap, but when you get to that corner, I think you'd be questioning it.
The problem is with Silverstone, it's such a large expanse of land that it's on. You look at something like Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, it doesn't cover that much area. Silverstone is a vast area that the whole circuit covers, and it's got its own microclimate almost. So what it's doing at one part of the circuit, it can be doing something entirely different at another part of the circuit. Even the circuit itself, it crosses 2 counties, Northamptonshire and Buckinghamshire.
Exactly, and it's the same with the likes of Spa and Nürburgring.
Yep.
Some corners it's wet, some corners it's dry. It's a real gamble, and like we can see, it's absolutely chucking it down over there compared to where it's, I wouldn't say sunny, but closer to tropical than it is over there.
And this is where we then start to see the variances, and this is not being insulting any of the drivers out there, because they'll all drive these cars better than I ever would, but this is where it makes the difference between what are largely the amateur drivers out there now and those that can adapt to the wetter conditions. These wetter conditions that without question are going to vary. It could get wetter, it might get drier again, so the grip levels are going to change corner from corner, lap from lap from lap, and this is what makes the difference between the likes of the AM drivers like Ian Loggy, who spend nearly every weekend racing a car, to some of the others that maybe only drop in 3 or 4 times a year, or maybe just every single weekend that we've got a GT Cup. They only race in this championship and not others.
Exactly. I think the experienced drivers and the ones who've done more seat time, we'll see them thrive in this race. We'll see them work their way up through the pack, especially from qualifying, which was dry. I think we'll really start to see the guys who have spent the time driving these cars. They understand the conditions, they understand the things like the wet lines and how to look after a car and race a car in the wet, because yes, you want to go fast, and yes, you want to set the fastest lap times, but ultimately you've got to finish the race, and the chances of having a moment and having an instant in the wet are far greater than in the dry.
Can I ask you another question now as well, because of course it was such a last minute decision as to whether the cars were going to go out on slicks and wets, and that's only one of the things that allows you to adapt to the conditions. So they've all largely, I'm assuming, gone for wet tyres, but potentially they've set the car up for a dry setup, so it's going to be stiffer than really it wants to be in the wet conditions. So how difficult is it as a driver to be able to deal with the fact that you've got the right tyre on, but actually the fundamentals of the springs and the damping offer a totally different set of conditions?
It's going to be a challenge, and I'm sure it'll be more of a challenge in some cars more than others. From the cars that I've driven, so the McLaren 570S GT4, of which there's plenty on the GT Cup grid, they're quite nice in the wet, they're quite good cars to drive, there's a lot of grip in them, they're very confidence inspiring. So generally we don't change much when it comes to driving them in the wet, but I'm sure the GT3s, they're the sort of cars where you've really got to have the setup nailed as well. So I think some of these guys who have made last minute changes, they may suffer a little bit, but I'm sure we'll see in time, because as we can see now, it looks fairly dry and fairly tame out there, but it's far different on the other side of the circuit.
On the other side of the circuit, yeah. Michelle is down there on the grid, so who's she going to bump into and have a chat to?
Well, of course, because it's all been a bit wet, they've all got their doors shut and the windows up. But I know that here we have got Hugo. I don't know, shall I open the door? He won't mind, will he? Hugo, just wanted to have a really quick chat, because obviously we just spoke to you. How are you feeling, especially now, of course, with the weather being so changeable?
I feel good, to be fair. I felt all right on the outlap. The other side of the circuit's a lot wetter than it is here. But I haven't done many laps in the wet, so we'll have to see what happens.
I have to say, when I just opened the door here, the heat inside this car is quite something.
Yeah, it's all right though.
He's used to it. I'd want the aircon on personally. So there we go, that's Hugo. I'm going to shut the door for him. And that is probably a sign that I should make my way off of the grid. But we are all nicely lined up. You'll see that at the front of the grid we've got Ian Loggy just here. There he is in the pink and the blue Mercedes, and then of course we have got Steve Burgess in the Radical on pole position. I am going to hand over to you, Mark, because I am heading off the grid, and I will see you the other side.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. Yep, your Max in the media centre if you need it. So we can see the last few crew members just sitting there on the grid. We've had a chat about tyres, we've had a chat about setups, and let's have a little chat about wheelbases as well, Mo, because obviously we've got some cars out there with a longer wheelbase, some cars out there with a shorter wheelbase. Wet conditions, you'd have thought the longer wheelbase is the better one, because you can sort of feel when it starts to get away more, but also most of these cars will have variable traction and ABS and things like that all the drivers can tweak as well as brake bias.
Exactly. There's a lot of variance in the cars. You know, we've got the likes of the Radicals next to the Mercedes, like we can see there. Two very different cars, but they'll both produce similar lap times. So I think there'll be a lot of varying lap times between these cars, although they, you know, in the dry, they're probably only a few tenths, a few seconds off each other. They're all very different when it comes down to the wet conditions. I know in the likes of GT4s, the McLaren is very different to the likes of the Mercedes and the Aston Martins. The McLaren is more planted, it has traction control and ABS, whereas the Mercedes has a variable traction control and ABS. You can turn it right down or all the way up. So things like that are really going to play a factor in this. The AM drivers, they can turn that traction control up for that bit more reassurance, whereas some cars they might not be able to. So there's a lot of variables between all the cars on this grid, and that's what ultimately makes the racing so exciting.
And of course, heading off the grid is the number 17 car, I'm afraid to say. Now, that is shown on my grid as being Will Dendy, but I spoke to Will Dendy over lunch and he said he wasn't driving today, so that would suggest it ought to be Patrick Collins behind the wheel of that car, but we've just seen it pushed off the grid, which is an enormous shame for that car, because it had a win in the sprint race yesterday in the hands of Will Dendy. It actually won the pit stop race on the road, but was a millimetre or a couple of millimetres low on ride height at the rear, so it was excluded, and the win went the way of Mark Hopton for the second time this year at the wheel of his Greystone car. So for Patrick Collins, he was into the car for his first race of the weekend, and it would appear to have not quite happened for him in the end.
I think those sort of things can easily come up on a race weekend when everything's run to such a tight schedule. These cars, they've got a personality of their own. They can sometimes throw up warning messages and problems right at the worst time, like when you're on the grid just before the race starts.
The one that amazed me really is, this is the GT Cup Championship, but the British GT Championship was at Spa last weekend, Spa-Francorchamps, and the car that's on the outside of the front row of the grid, Ian Loggies, was racing there. By the time the car gets back from Belgium, gets back to the workshop, is prepped after a race in a foreign country, and then comes here to Silverstone to test. That car will have only been the number 16 Mercedes in the workshop 48 hours maybe. They've had very little time to prep it. It's busy guys, aren't they, these teams?
These guys don't stop. There's, the appreciation they deserve is, I don't think you can give them enough appreciation. The hard work that goes into these cars is unbelievable. It
looks glamorous, doesn't it, motorsport from the outside?
Very much so. I can assure you it's not the same on the inside. We all love it, and we all have a huge passion for it.
I wouldn't change it for the world, but yeah, it's hard work.
I know that even our guys after Spa last weekend, they were preparing the car for this weekend whilst we were still at Spa. The preparation just doesn't stop. It's a constant cycle. You're constantly on these cars making sure that everything's running well, and it pays off when you get to the circuit.
And it also goes to show with the evolution of these cars and manufacturers now. They're building cars that could race every weekend. So, you go back 20 years and the car couldn't race every weekend. It just wouldn't mechanically do it.
Exactly. It's a credit to the manufacturers as well, because these cars are great.
So we should be able to guide you through the grid and give you the drivers that are taking part in this particular race. Remember, the pros can't drive in the sprint races, where you've got two sporting drivers or a sporting driver partnered with a pro sporting. You can choose. So the grid lines up as follows. Steve Burgess sits on pole position with Ian Loggie alongside, and it is Simon Orange and Hugo Cook on row number 2. Ian Campbell sits down the inside of row number 3 with John Whitehouse for company, and on row number 4 it is Leo Lucas and Graham Tilley. The next row of the grid sees Andre Borodin lined up alongside Tom Webb, and it's Tom Barrow, who was the leading car in Group GTB in qualifying, has Lucky Kira for company on row number 6. Row number 7 didn't get the starting driver. I'll make inquiries into that. Charlotte Birch and Jensen Lund will pick it up. It says Charlotte Birch on the screen, so we'll stick with that and double check alongside Roy Millington. And then it is number 39 James Kell that's got Stephen Walton for company on row number 8. The 9th row of the grid is James Wallace alongside former champion Adam Hatfield. And then as we move on to row number 10, it's Phil Carter and Mark Hopton who are next up on the 10th row of the grid. Row 11, Tom Roach and John Curry, with then Patrick Collins having been pushed off the grid on row number 12, so it will be Matt LeBreton that lines up on his own on that 12th row of the grid. Row 13, Steph Suhr sits alongside Tim Kresick, with row 14 being Connor Flynn and Jody Sloss. And then as we move to the final couple of rows of the grid, it is Ria Lucas that sits alongside Ron Trenker, and then David Franklin has got Mike Price, arguably one of the quickest cars in the field. It's already won races overall this year, starting off the very back of the grid. That light green Mercedes is going to be one to watch, I would say.
I would expect it to move its way up through the field very quickly, especially in these conditions. I'm sure it'll thrive. It's going to be interesting to see it negotiate the GT4 traffic as well. There's a lot of cars on that grid, so that'll be a challenge for sure, but I think we'll see him definitely move up to the front end of the field, and hopefully we'll have a fight with the cars at the top end by the end of the race, because yes, it's a short race, but there's plenty of time for things to happen.
I'm just receiving some information with regards to the cars that are starting this race on slick tyres, so I am just making a note of it. It's going to be 2 formation laps we hear, which usually suggests that the clock will start to tick when they complete the first of those formation laps, so we'll have to wait and see as to whether that is the case, but that would usually be the case as to who is when that happens. So in terms of the cars that I'm led to believe are on slick tyres, second row of the grid, the number 67 McLaren Simon Orange on slick tyres. All of the sixth row of the grid, both Tom Barrow in the BMW and Lucky Kira in the 247 Lamborghini on slick tyres. I'm led to believe on the ninth row of the grid, Kavi Jundu Adam Phillips at the wheel, Adam Hatfield rather, at the wheel of the number 25 McLaren is on slicks, as is Tom Roach in the number 26 Paddock Motorsport McLaren. So both of the Paddock GT4 cars, your team, Mo, have gone for slicks. Patrick Collins, who was pushed off the grid, was on slicks. Tim Kresick for Par Racing with Caffeine 6, the number 86 Porsche on slicks, and the other car that's on slicks is the GT Ginetta of Connor Flynn. So those cars on slicks, Mo. Good decision, do you think, bearing in mind what the weather's done in the last 5 minutes or so?
I think it's a gamble. Of course, I'm backing the Paddock guys for making that decision because it's a one that I think I would have gone as well. I think it will pay off in the later parts of the race as opposed to the earlier stages because, as we can see, the track is still slightly damp, so I think they'll probably struggle at the start, but I would expect them to see them working their way through when the other guys are really struggling to keep the heat down in the wets towards the end of the race. This is all dependent though. If it rains again, then it throws that strategy out the window, but fingers crossed. I know the Paddock guys will have been keeping a close eye on the weather and making sure that the decision is the right one. So I'm intrigued to see what happens actually.
Just picking on a bit more admin because I didn't get the opportunity before the race due to support races. I said it was Matt LeBreton that was driving the number 71 McLaren. No, there's just been a change that's confirmed. It's Neil Garnham that's driving the number 71 McLaren. I can confirm it is Charlotte Birch that drives the number 9 Lamborghini. And I can also confirm that one car that's missing off the grid is the number 62 Ferrari that John Saunders was due to share with Matt Spark. That car has had gearbox issues, so that is why that car is absent from the grid. Patrick Collins is out there by the look of things, so whatever the problem was with that number 17 McLaren, the Orange Racing powered by JMH McLaren, they've sorted it and he's able to join in. That's good.
That's really good, especially when when the car's leaving the grid at the start of a race. It's never a good sign. Normally it means something pretty serious, but it's good to see him back out again and adding to the very large number of McLaren GT4s that are out there. So I think in these conditions as well, it's going to be interesting with the McLarens because they're good cars in the wet, and it's nice to see so many of them out there. And I'm intrigued to see how they compare against the Mercedes because in British GT this year we've not had a wet race to see how the GT4s compare against each other.
No, we haven't. We haven't had a wet race. I don't think we've had a wet GT Cup race really, and you can't really say this is wet either. It's getting to that stage where the drivers don't like it. It's not wet, it's not dry, it's just greasy, and it's not going to be fun out there, is it?
No, it's going to be a handful for sure, especially when it's wetter on some parts of the circuit than others. I think they'll have a bit of a shock on that first lap when they realise they're trying to find out how much grip is really out there. It's a real scramble to just find where that grip is, but at the same time you don't want to put your race at risk and throw it off on the first lap. So there's a lot going through their heads at the moment, and I would expect there to be a very lively first lap.
We did hear from Michelle Livings, our roving pit reporter, who hopefully has found her Mac now, just in case it rains, that it was a puncture for Patrick Collins, so that's why the number 17 car was pushed off the grid. So thank you to Michelle for letting us know that. As I suggested, I thought the clock would start to tick when we completed the first formation lap. Indeed, that is the case. Even at this pace, we're still seeing a bit of spray coming up, so I think it is sort of going to be wettish for the first few laps, but looking out of the window again, looks level has come up a little bit. We've still got a few ominous clouds around though, haven't we, over Silverstone? So even now I have no idea what it's going to do, Mo.
It's definitely on the fence. I think this is about as on the fence as you can get, really.
It's painful, isn't it, sitting on the fence sometimes, but yeah, we're in the lap of the gods, aren't we, quite literally?
Yeah, I think we're going to see some really interesting racing here. I would like to see it dry up to play the strategy out a bit longer, and like we saw in the race just before this with the radicals, everyone's moving offline onto the wet part of the track to cool down the wets and then get back on the racing line when they get to the corners.
We'll wait and see. Some are on slicks, most are on wets, but we're about to get our first sprint race of today underway. Steve Burgess in the Radical in a straight line. Might do okay here. I saw Mike Price peel his way off. He was due to start at the back of the grid in the Mercedes, but Steve Burgess, we know, is quick in a straight line at the wheel of that Radical. He's going wheel to wheel with Ian Loggy though as they head round through Copse Corner and head into the unknown, really. You're leaning on the car. You don't know how much grip is there. You don't want to get tangled up in an incident on the first lap, but I'm afraid we've got one already, and that is Tim Kresick, who has lost a wheel on the Porsche and is backwards in the middle of the circuit, and that is surely going to mean a safety car. I can't see how the marshals can get out there and clear it out the way in time.
No, unless he can drive that thing away, which I don't think he will. That's in a very dangerous position. It's the exit of a high-speed corner, so I would expect the the rescue team to be coming in and moving that car pretty quickly. But it's a shame that it's a safety car so early on. But you know, if things go racing again, we should hopefully get some racing in. You know, compared to yesterday where there was, what was it, 6 cars off at the first lap?
Yeah.
At least it's not that level.
Yeah, I think it was a little touch between David Franklin's Audi and Tim Krezik's Porsche that brought about the problem. So the safety car is understandably being scrambled. So that is going to bring about an early halt to this race. We had a fairly extensive safety car period in the sprint race yesterday, and well, there is simply no other decision to make. We've got debris on the circuit, we've got a car slap bang in the middle of the circuit. Yes, Silverstone is a long lap, but we've got to look after our fantastic marshals. You know, it was a year ago this weekend where very sadly we had a marshal killed at Brands Hatch. You know, we can't put our marshals in danger, and when a car's in the middle of the circuit, the safest thing to do is safety car period. And looking at the way that the car is rolling, shouldn't be a long safety car period. A lap, maybe 2 laps, and we should be clear.
Hopefully that'll be the case and we can get back going again. And like you said about the marshals, these guys, they're volunteering. They're here on their own decision. They're not being paid to be here. They're here for the love of the sport, and you know, the appreciation they deserve is, you know, you can't give them enough appreciation, because they risk their lives so that we can go racing.
Yeah, I mean, we say, you know, the glamour of motorsport. Well, it's not overly glamorous being a marshal, but they love it so much they turn in week in and week out. And as an ambassador for the British Motorsport Marshals Club, the BMMC, at marshals.co.uk, if you want to try and understand how you can become a marshal, you're not just put out there on your own, you're put out there with an experienced team around you, taster days that allow you to understand where and how you can get involved as well. So have a look, marshals.co.uk, and maybe sign up to what's called a taster day. Doesn't matter whether it's Silverstone, doesn't matter whether it's GT Cup, any circuit, any championship, we would be absolutely delighted to have you. Marshals.co.uk. So there's the Audi. It doesn't look as though the Audi came off worse for wear as a result of that contact. It did look like sort of light contact to the side of the Porsche, didn't it? But it was probably just in the wrong place, because it looked as though what had happened was it had broken the wheel, hadn't it? So it wasn't a puncture, it was a broken wheel. As Ian Logie comes in, he's changing off a wet onto a slick, so they're making a decision reasonably quickly. When he starts to get towards the GTC and GT3 cars, then it becomes a tougher thing. And of course, he's got less time in which to do it. But he's not the only one making that decision. Steve Burgess is in at the wheel of the Raw Radical.
I think everyone is jumping on the bandwagon with it now. And the Paddock Motorsport number 44 McLaren as well, they've jumped on it. So I would expect to see a lot of these GT3 cars all coming in, but you've got to take advantage of it now whilst you're on the safety car, because you lose far more time, as one of the Radicals just lost a wheel.
It did, yeah, absolutely. The team were just waving. The Raw Motorsport crew clearly hadn't got the nut on correctly. I saw Mike Price dive in at the beginning of the race as well, so I would suggest he also came in to change onto a slick tyre. So the safety car, with its lights still illuminated, is heading past the wing and up towards Abbey. You can see a few of the cars, even at this slow pace, are still diving for the wet parts of the circuit. Andre Borodin also heading for the wetter parts of the circuit. But I think we might have another couple of laps behind the safety car, because to me it looked like they weren't going to leave that Porsche there. They're going to winch it onto the flatbed recovery unit and get it out of harm's way. So that's, I would say, at least one more lap behind the safety car now.
It's a very long recovery for one car, but those guys are working flat out to get that car off the track.
Absolutely.
You can't risk leaving that kind of vulnerable place, because the walls that are around the outside of the circuit, they're there for a reason. They're there to protect the drivers driving and the marshals behind those walls. And if you've got a car in the way, you just run the risk of a far bigger accident. So they're doing what they're going to have to do.
I think Mike Price at the wheel of this light green Mercedes has just had a little moment, so he's still trying to get some temperatures into the slicks. The slicks, of course, come out preheated out of the little ovens mode, don't they? But that doesn't mean that they are fully up to temperature, so you've still got to work the tyre once they're put on. And of course, in damp conditions, it's only so hard you can work it before it catches you out. And I gather, we've just heard, that Mike Price might have had a small little issue on that lap.
Yeah, it's so hard to retain the heat in these tyres in these conditions, never mind when it's dry. These tyres come out of the ovens red hot, they're straight onto the car. But if you've got a long drive down the pit lane, they could cool 10, 20, if not more degrees in that run to the exit of pit lane. And that's a lot of valuable temperature. And when you're under safety car conditions and you can't push as hard, again, that makes things much harder, because there's only so much you can do to keep that heat in the tyres.
So there is Ian Logie on his fresh set of Pirelli slick tyres. He has now caught the train. He's behind David Franklin's Audi. Nice to see David back in the championship, and everybody else is coming in. So Hugo Cook has come in to decide that it's time for slick tyres. Ian Campbell, who was also out racing at Spa last weekend, making his debut in the British GT Championship, heads in to grab some Pirelli slick tyres as well. The good thing is with these, it's a centre locking wheel, isn't it, on the GT3 cars at least. They've got the air jack, so it doesn't take long to change them. For GT4, the difficulty is it's not quite as easy on some cars because some have a centre locking wheel, others have multiple studs.
Exactly. The likes of the Supra and I believe the Mercedes, they have the 5 wheel nuts. In our lucky position, we have the centre lock wheel nuts on the McLaren, which is always a nice thing to have. But it does mean that when those tyres come on the car, when you've got a limited pit stop time and you have to meet a certain time, you end up being sat there for so long because, you know, the tyres have come on the car really early and you're sat up on the stand just waiting to go.
Exactly. Tyre temp, yeah. So, right, of these cars at the sharp end, I think the number 76 car, the number 67 car is in the best position because Simon Orange started on the slick tyres, we were told. There's Matt Franks, who is one of our recovery drivers here at Silverstone and many other circuits as well. Just making sure that all the equipment is stowed away properly and then they can get the car out of harm's way. So the leader of the race at this stage is now going to be Leo Lucas, is going to be leading the race at the wheel of the 76 prepared, number 76 McLaren. It's always hard to say that, but you'll get what I mean. The team is called 7T with a letter T and then 6, and the car always runs as car number 76. So there's Mark Hopton. That car went to victory in Group GTH yesterday when he was sharing with Ewan Hankey, their second group win of the championship season. So the 76 car leads the way. It's on wet tyres, however, we gather. The car in second place, which is Andre Borodin, number 24 car, guess what, is on wet tyres. And the first of the cars that's on slicks is number 76 Simon Orange. So once we get things underway, you would expect that Orange Racing powered by JMH car that's third in this race, that dark blue and orange car there, to maybe work its way towards the sharp end. And that's important for them because they're right at the sharp end, not just of the GT3 championship, but the overall championship.
Yeah, it's really valuable to get these, you know, the valuable championship points. And as we can see, there's a dry line appearing. So those guys at the front of the field who are still on slicks, still on wets, I think they're going to be slightly worried at the fact that, you know, the temperature's going to build very quickly in these wet tyres, and you've really got to look after them because, yes, there's only 12 minutes left and probably even less than that when we go green. But in that short period of time, anything can happen, and those tyres can get very, very hot, and it can hurt your lap times big time.
So there is Ian Campbell pushing on. He's about half a lap behind the train at the moment, so he will be driving as flat out as he can on his newly placed Pirelli slick tyres. But the lights are out on the safety car, or are they? No, the lights are still on the safety car, so I think we're going to get one further lap again. I think it was just a bit too late for the recovery unit to get off the circuit to allow the safety car to extinguish its lights. So I think slightly frustratingly, there might be a further lap behind the safety car. The one good thing is now the track is clear, Mo. This lap behind the safety car is not going to sort of take as long as the previous lap, so the safety car will speed up now, won't it? And that will help everybody, so it'll allow them to build those tyre temperatures a bit more. What it won't really do is help the cars that are on the wet tyres, because even off the racing line now, there doesn't look to be a great deal of moisture.
No, and I think everyone's losing and winning in this situation because the guys on the slicks, they're going to want to get racing so the track can dry up so they can take advantage of having the slick tyres on. But the guys on the wet tyres, they also, you know, they're trying to keep temperature in the tyres but not overheat them. So I think everyone's going to be scratching their heads as to what they do at the moment, and it's going to be a big roll of the dice when it goes green again. And
I think some of those that were looking as though they were winners a few laps ago are now looking as though they might be losers, because of course those that came in a bit later on and went from the wet to the slick, the likes of Ian Loggy, are at the back of the queue, and because we've now got an extra lap behind the safety car, it's one less lap that they can overtake, isn't it? So they're going to have to drive even harder to try and make places up.
Yeah, you can never work out the kind of the maths behind it, but you've just got to gamble on whether the advantage you'll gain from being on slicks will outweigh what you lose from pitting, and I think that's what everyone's gambled on, that they'll gain enough time being on those slick tyres to make their way back up and gain some position, at least retain the position they had, if not gain a few more.
And it's those sorts of dynamics that I like. It makes motor racing for me, and in particular, I know this is a sprint race, and even later on the 50-minute race you can argue is not a long race, but it's those dynamics in GT racing that I like. Different things, drivers doing different things, different setups, different cars, different tyres, all of those things coming together to ultimately, hopefully, tick all of the boxes in the case of some of them, and others sort of tick the wrong box. So into the pit lane comes David Franklin. So he is a later pit stopper, and on will go the Pirelli slick tyres onto that one. Now the lights are still on the safety car. We've seen them get extinguished not far after this corner now, so they're just coming up towards Abbey. and then from there it's on towards Farm, and it's usually Farm and in towards the loop at the earliest that the lights get extinguished. At the latest it will be just after they head through Aintree and onto the bottom of the Wellington Straight. So I would say next time we see the safety car, lights, if they're still on, will only be on for a matter of seconds before we get them fully extinguished. And I think nearly everybody that's been in has now caught the safety car, haven't they?
It looks like it. Everyone's ready to go racing again, and I think they have been since 10 minutes ago when we first went to safety car period. So I'm sure the tensions are high and everyone's ready to go racing, and hopefully we'll see a nice dash to the finish.
Yeah, let's hope the frustration isn't high though, and they all just calm it down, because what we don't want is cars coming together and creating a further safety car period. Let's have now what will be about 9 minutes of pure racing, and all of these quick cars at the back to look forward to, and how can they pick their way through. There are so many what were ultimately potential race-winning cars that are now at the tail end of this field. So lights are off on the safety car. It is going to be up to Leo Lucas to decide as to when he wants to get things underway. Andre Borodin will look to try and go with him at the wheel of the Greystone GT McLaren, but I would say watch out for the car in third place, the dark blue and orange Simon Orange driven number 67 McLaren, which we gather started on slicks and therefore is at the moment the highest placed car that is on the right tyre for these conditions that we've got in front of us. So less than 9 minutes to go, we get the race underway. Roy Millington in the Group GTC Ferrari is there in what is fourth place at the moment, and Graham Tilley's having a great run in the Mercedes in fifth, with Tom Webb completing the top six. But we finally get the race fully underway as the cars thread their way through Cops Corner. You can still see some of those that are on wets are struggling a little bit there. Mark Carter running very wide indeed, but already we have got Simon Orange through and ahead of Andre Borodin. I said watch out for the number 67 McLaren Mo. He's up to second already, and surely he's going to close in on the race lead.
He must do. You know, there's the guys out there have really got to take advantage of this situation. Like you can see, it's very close at the front end. It looks like the orange car will hopefully go for a move here. It's going to be very, very close, but he's passed him before he's even got to the corner, which is great. So it's, especially at Silverstone, it's all about the exits. You can set up a move a few corners before you even make the move, and that is a pure example of what we've just seen there. And
of course, yeah, Simon Orange is on the right tyre, so we can get on that throttle that little bit earlier, whereas for Leo Lucas, he's a bit of a sitting duck because he just can't get the power down because he's on the wets. And here comes Ian Loggy. Hugo Cook at the wheel of the Mercedes is trying to wiggle his way through and past some of the Group GTH traffic. That's Patrick Collins that they nip up the inside of, so we'll see as to how far up we can usher those cars over the remaining 7.5 minutes of this race, because Ian Loggy was 24th at the start of this lap. Hugo Cook was 25th. Now, if they've just got through and past the number 17 car of Patrick Collins, that only moves them up to 22nd, but I think they might be in the top 20 by the end of the lap potentially. So difficult to know what's going on. So we didn't know at the start of the race because of the weather conditions. We still don't really know now, do we?
No, it's very hard to tell. I think it's going to be a bit of a traffic jam out there, especially with the GT3s trying to come through with the GT4s. And in these conditions, everyone's a little bit apprehensive, and we can see here there's a good battle going on for third place.
That's Graham Tilley, isn't it? The Tech Serve car was going so well at Alton Park when he was running in fourth place until he had, I think, what was an alternator issue. But it'd be great to see Graham Tilley pick up a reasonable result here, and well, he's on for it at the moment. He's trying hard to see if he can unlock the door and wiggle his way through and past Andre Borodin's car, which is struggling to say the least on its wet tyres at this stage. Simon Orange over the start-finish line leads the way, sets the fastest lap of the race, 2 minutes 16.081. It's still Leo Lucas in second, Andre Borodin third, Graham Tilley fourth. The other cars still trying to carve their way through the traffic, which includes the car of Hugo Cook, who is coming under pressure. The car of Ian Loggy, who is coming under pressure from the radical of Steve Burgess, who has gone through and taken the place away. So where are they this time through as they come over the start-finish line? Ian Loggy, yeah, inside the top 20, up to 18th now for the number 16 Merc.
Yeah, he's very quickly making his way up, and as you would expect in a GT3 up against GT4s, but the traffic management's a big part of this as well. He's got good experience with that racing in British GT and many other championships. You've really got to time your overtakes. Sometimes it's worth sacrificing a little bit at one corner to gain back on another corner. It's just, you've got to think about things so much more when you've got traffic around you. It's not just plain sailing.
All the drivers were told in the briefing as well, you know, be aware that the cars ahead of you have very limited visibility in these cars. Yes, some of them have rear view cameras that assist, but it's not easy to see out of the mirror. So if you're going to overtake, do it decisively, but do it cleanly was the advice. And I think that was where Steve Burgess unfortunately fell foul yesterday. There was a little bit of contact as he was trying to deal with the back marker, and he was penalised, not in terms of race result for it, but he had to point himself in the direction direction of the headmaster as such to explain himself, and I think held his hands up. So they do need to be careful, because what you don't want to do now is have an incident in this race that precludes you from getting in the fun in the pit stop race that will be coming up a little bit later on. And Hugo Cook there at the wheel of the 66 Mercedes did the right thing, blended out of the throttle, knew it wasn't going to happen. He'll wait and he'll pick off some of the slower cars elsewhere around the lap.
Exactly, it's a smart thing to do sometimes, because your race isn't won. Well, it's won. It can be lost in the corner, but it's not going to be won in a corner, especially in these situations. These GT4s, they're not positions that you really need. You can take the time to pass them. Those GT3s have got the straight line speed to just wait that little bit longer and then make the move in a safer place, and that's what we're seeing. Everyone's got their head switched on here, and they're really thinking about what they're doing, and we can see the GT3s at the front of the field. They've now got clear space to go running and just get some clear air. And
we've also got Graham Tilley now up into third position. Fantastic stuff. We've regularly seen him out racing in the Nissan prior to this year. This Mercedes is brand new for him for this season. It's the ex-Sam de Haan car that he acquired in the off-season, and now he is looking to close in on second position. He's got Leo Lucas directly ahead of him. Now, Graham must have started on slick tyres. We weren't aware that he'd started on slick tyres, but if he's on wets, crumbs, he's got some serious pace, because he's about to go through into second position. Brilliant stuff. On for the best result of the season so far, if he can hang on to it. He's got 3 3/4 minutes to go. The fastest laps keep tumbling. Steve Burgess in the Radical might be in 8th position, but he's just posted a 2-minute 12.117, and that is now, about 15 seconds quicker than they were circulating only a few laps ago.
That's incredible, and that just shows those guys who gambled on the slicks, it's paying off. And like we can see with Tom Roach, actually, he's in a GTH car, but he's P6 overall and P1 in GTH. So he's, the gamble of the slick tyres is now paying off, and it's nice to see the paddock cars doing well.
Absolutely, both of the GT4 McLarens from Paddock Motorsport went the way of slick tyres, and Tom Roach is pretty experienced. He's raced in Mazdas, where he's become champion. He's raced in both Mark 1s and Mark 5s. We've seen him in Porsche Carrera Cup GB. He also briefly raced in the British GT Championship, so the Welshman's got plenty of experience underneath his belt. And at the wheel of the Car Chase Heroes backed McLaren, which is the company that he owns and runs, he is going beautifully well and is on course for a winning Group GTH. Now, Andre Borodin is the cork in the bottle. Steve Burgess will ease his way by at the wheel of the Radical, so a further place lost for the Greystone GT McLaren, which just can't do anything. Andre is driving that thing as hard as he can, but if you're on the wrong tyre, there's nothing you can do. So through goes Lucky Kira, through will go Tom Roach, and Andre Borodin is going to lose more places and drop like a stone through the order, but he's driving that car with nothing in reserve still, as far as he's concerned.
It's painful being in that situation, because no matter what you do, you can't find the grip. You can't get the grip that the car needs, especially in a GT3 where there's so much power and there's so much demand through those tyres. If you're not on the right tyres for the right conditions, then it really does hurt you. Like we're seeing these GT3s on wet tyres, they're hurting bad, and it's a shame to see it, because the guys driving these cars know what they're doing. They've got the pace, they've got the potential to be fast and putting in good times. But like I said, if you're not on the right tyres, you'll pay for it.
Do you think we can cheer on to gain another position, Tom Roach? Because we've only had a GTH car once inside the top 6 all so far this season, and he's in 7th at the moment. So, in fact, he is in 6th place at the moment. So if we could urge him up to 5th, that would be fantastic for him. I think Graham Tilley might lose out on 2nd place before too much longer, because Steve Burgess at the wheel of the Radical is closing in, having set another fastest lap of the race at 2:11.423, whilst this car is leading the way. Simon Orange opted for the slick tyre in consultation with the Orange Racing powered by JMH team, no doubt also with Michael O'Brien having some input into that, so he leads the way. Graham Tilley is no longer in 2nd, because Steve Burgess in the Radical has picked up 2nd. Graham Tilley is down to 3rd, and Leo Lucas I think might be short-lived for 4th, because he's going to get picked off I think by Lucky Kira and potentially by one of your cars, the number 26 Tom Roach driven McLaren, potentially on the final lap of the race, which is what we're on now.
Yeah, and like we said with those slick tyres, we keep coming back to it, but I think it's the talk of this race, the tyre situation. The guys who went for the slicks, it's paid off. It's, in one of the longer races as well, it would be interesting.
And you just think about, what you said at the beginning of the race. You said slicks. They were on the formation lap, and you said you'd made the wrong decision calling slicks. You were going to change to wets. And here we are again. Your first decision was the right one, but it's swung so many times in this race.
Exactly. I think for most of this race, I still would have taken the shot of going for the wets. But look at the track now. It's basically dry. It's dry on the racing line. You know, it's a bit damp and a bit greasy off the racing line, but you're not over there anyway, so that doesn't matter. But yeah, I think this is like you said before, it's the enjoyment side of racing where you're taking these gambles, you're taking these risks. Yes, sometimes it doesn't pay off, but when it does pay off like this, it feels amazing.
And here comes somebody that will be absolutely feeling amazing at the moment. Simon Orange comes through to take the win in the sprint race today. We've got Ian Loggy going to carve his way around the outside of Andre Borodin. So Ian Loggy, he was right at the tail end of the field. He might finish inside the top 6 the way things are going. Problems, I'm afraid, there for Connor Flynn with damage to the rear end of the Group GTA Ginetta. Steve Burgess takes second and sets the fastest lap on the final lap with a 2-minute 6.516. Is Graham Tilley going to finish in 3rd place as Tom Roach looks to try and carve his way around the outside? Yeah, Graham Tilley, season's best, I think that is, for Graham Tilley, driving solo to finish in 3rd place, just ahead of Lucky Kira, who wins Group GTC and finishes in 4th place. And Tom Roach, that's the best finish for a Group GTH car this year, all down to the tyre choice of your team, Paddock Motorsport. Tom Roach will be pleased with that. It'll be a happy Welshman down in the garage. He finishes in 5th.
That is incredible. They've got a 1-2 as well with Kavi Jundu in P2 in GTH. That's brilliant. Those guys have had a tough weekend this weekend. It's been hard. I've been working with them on the driver side, and they've really had it tough. So it's nice to see them finally have a breakthrough and get a good result that they all deserve.
Plower, you'll be smiling, won't he?
Very much so. There'll be some cheering in that garage right now.
Hugo Cook finishes in 6th position, Leo Lucas 7th, Ian Loggy 8th in the end. Remember, he was at the back of the grid because he pitted quite late for tyres. Kavi Jundu and Andre Borodin had slipped to 10th in the end of that one. A few more cars heading over the start-finish line. Mo, if you want to hang around, please do, but if you want to disappear so you can be with the team, I do understand. So it's your choice, mate. You're going to disappear, yeah?
I will disappear.
Okay,
Go join the celebrations.
I thought you would do, mate. I thought you would do. I'll give you time off for good behaviour. Thanks to Mo Ritson for joining me in commentary, Mo. We'll catch you later on in the season. So he's going to go and enjoy the celebrations with the team. I thought he would want to because he's been working so hard with those drivers. Why would we deny him the opportunity of going and soaking up with the atmosphere at the time they come back into the pit lane area? So I think that is everybody through now to take the checkered flag. What a win. What a decision it was. And hopefully Michelle might be able to grab a word with Simon Orange to understand, was it his choice to go for slicks? Was it the team's? Or was it Michael O'Brien who made and had the largest input into that decision? Whoever it was or combination, it was the right one, because Simon Orange comes through to claim the win by nearly 17 seconds in the end from the Group GTO winning Radical of Steve Burgess. Graham Tilley, what a result for him, finishing in 3rd place, with Lucky Kira, the Group GTC winner, in 4th, and the Group GTH winner Tom Roach finishing in 5th place, the highest place finish we've had for a Group GTH car all season. Hugo Cook was there in 6th, ahead of Leo Lucas in 7th. Ian Loggy recovered into 8th place with Kavi Jundu in 9th, and Andre Borodin completed the top 10. Just outside of the top 10, Ian Campbell was 11th, ahead of Roy Millington, and Mike Price, who, remember, started at the back of the grid, came into the pits on the warm-up lap to change tyres. He finished in 13th place, ahead of James Kell, who was 14th, and Tom Barrow won Group GTB, finishing in 5th place. Patrick Collins was 16th, ahead of Tom Webb, Charlotte Birch, Mark Hopton, and Neil Garnham, who drove the number 71 McLaren in that race. Then it was Philip Carter ahead of Erica Hoffman. Steve Ruston. I thought that was actually supposed to be John Whitehouse driving the 44 in that car, but it says Ruston on the results sheet. Sarah Misser, Sam Mayer Lochnan, who I thought I saw in the background of the shot at the beginning, so I think that might have been James Wallace driving that one again. Might have had a few shuffles of drivers than we were expecting. John Curry and co thereafter. Finishing off the lead lap, and of course it did retire late on with that damage, was Paul Maxfield at the wheel of the Ginetta. David Franklin had issues and dropped off the lead lap, and Tim Creswick we know about. He brought about that safety car period with the incident at turn number 1. So wow, there were more twists and turns than a pig's tail in that one, and we'll have to wait and see as to what kind of reaction we get from Michelle, who's down there in the pit lane.
Back to the garages. Yeah, my goodness, a race of tyre changes. I don't think I've ever seen so many. And definitely all those cars taking advantage of the safety car in really the first half of the race, which was a real shame, especially when it's such a short race. But at least they were taking advantage, and of course it paid off quite well for Steve Burgess in the end, because he managed to work his way quickly back through. Now, I know you did say, Mark, to have a word with Simon. Obviously the cars are all still coming in, so what I might do, because he did take the decision to go with the slicks, unlike a lot of the cars, so it'd be really good to find out about that. So what I might do is have a chat with Simon in between the end of this race and the beginning of our final race of the weekend, because then we can have a proper chat and once he's out of the car and everything. But it was certainly an interesting decision, and of course it has dried up, so the slicks is the thing that paid off in the end. But you know, it's a gamble, and it's a hard call to make. I think you'll agree, won't you, Mark?
Absolutely, and as Mo Ritson was saying, you know, even he didn't know what to do. It's a gamble. You've got to flick the coin up in the air, and it's going to land one side or the other. And some of them got it right, some of them got it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the good thing is there's still another race to come, and of course it's the longer one because we've got 50 minutes with the pit stop, and hopefully we won't have the safety car out for quite so long in this next one, so the drivers can get a really good go around this fantastic circuit, this nice long circuit here at Silverstone. And I can tell you that we will be going live, bringing you that race around. Well, it's due at 5:10, so we'll probably go live on air around about 5 o'clock. The best thing to do is to keep an eye on all the social media channels, because that will have all the latest information. You can go to GT Cup on Instagram and of course Facebook, where we're streaming this live, and streaming live on YouTube as well. We hope you can join us for that. We look forward to it, and in the meantime, from Silverstone, it's goodbye.